racers, and welcome to the Imola Grand Prix. As we see the Alcatore make its home track hot lap, let's run through the basic information of this circuit. The Autodromo Internazionale Enzatino Ferrari is a motor racing circuit in the town of Imola, in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, 25 miles east of Bologna. It is one of the few major international circuits to run in anti-clockwise direction. The circuit is named after the Ferrari's late founder, Enzo Ferrari, and his son, Alfredo Dino Ferrari, and has an FIA Grade A license to date. This is a technical 3.1 mile long track with 19 turns, 10 to the left and 9 to the right. It consists of the high speed and low speed corners and chicanes. It makes it a challenging track to overtake on paper after excluding the only DRS and hence overtaking zone, which is on the start-finish straight, and achieves a top speed of around 195 miles per hour. There are different tire strategies to apply in this typical F1 2021 track, varying between 1 to 2 stop strategies, mainly depending on the driver's style. This track is most remembered for the dramatic crashes of the legend Ayrton Senna and Gilles Villeneuve, after which the track faced technical changes to comply with the FIA safety measures in order to become as we see it today. However, one cannot underestimate the spectacular battles the track has to offer, given the dynamic weather conditions offered during this spring period in Italy. The best lap holder of this track belongs to Sir Lewis Hamilton with a 1:15.484 in 2020 with the Mercedes, also being a winner on this track during the same year. However, Max Verstappen holds the latest win on the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix Imola with the Red Bull.
And now we're going to explain in a little bit more detail the hot lap of the Imola Grand Prix for our fellow Delta Pace racers. I must admit it's not an easy track to master, but if you really get the corners right, you can win a lot of time. So you will learn during the lap that you can win or lose a lot of time if you master or not master certain chicanes. And if you really learn the throttle speed to get it as early as possible, you will also win a lot of time. But of course, this will take a lot of practice in order to master this. And I must admit, it took me a lot of time in order to improve my time and get those corners right. But now that we have it, let's get on with it and let's explain this lap. So we are exiting turns 18 and 19, trying to get that longest distance possible before we start the lap. We're going to turn on the DRS, and beyond the start-finish line, we're going to take the shortest route towards turn 1 and turn 2 being the first chicane that we have. So at around the 50-meter mark, that's where we're going to downshift into gear 5. My apologies, it's not the 50-meter mark, but it's around the 65-meter mark, somewhere on those lines, where we're going to downshift into gear 5, kissing both apexes of the chicane. But in the process, we're going to short shift into gear 6 because we're going to have a risk and return when it comes to trying to get the throttle as early as possible, the flow as early as possible, without making the car spin. And it's a very, very hard task. I must admit, this is one of the hardest set of chicanes that you will find during a lap. If you understeer a little bit, your lap is ruined. If you oversteer a little bit, the car will spin, and not just your lap would be ruined, but also you would cause a retirement to yourself and quali lap ruined or race ruined as well. So this is a little bit of a risk versus return, but to get it right, you will need to kiss both apexes, and during turn 2 and turn 3 you will need to short shift into gear 6 in order to get that flow going, in order to get more traction into the car without making it spin. So beyond this point, we are going to short shift into gear 5, short shift into gear 6, my apologies, and beyond that point, without making the car spin, we will complete the first chicane. Now, we are arrived at the second chicane. As you will notice, I'm going to attack a little bit the chicane, but what I'm going to do as well is that I'm going to lift off as soon as I'm going to touch this corner, because if you keep throttling it even when you're mounting this corner, the car will have a semi-spin. So you will need to be very, very cautious that you will need to lift off a little bit in this corner, keep that gear, and as soon as you arrive at the subsequent corner, you're going to short downshift into gear 5 and kiss the apex of the subsequent turn, after which you will short shift into gear 6 and get the throttle as early as possible without making the car understeering. So lifting up, downshift into gear 5, short shift into gear 6, getting the throttle as early as possible, and that would be the turn. Now we are arriving at the Tosa turn. So beyond the 50-meter mark, given that this is a little bit of an uphill, you can brake a little bit later. You can brake and downshift into gear 3. By gear 3 you will have a little bit of an understeer, but it's just enough to make the corner as efficient as possible. As soon as you touch the apex, you will short shift into gear 4 and you will try to mangle between trying to get that early throttle and not making the car spin. But of course, if you get the throttle as early as possible without making the car spin, so you will have that extra traction found, you will gain a lot of time. So we're going to downshift into gear 3, touch the apex, short shift into gear 4, get the throttle as early as possible, and the Tosa turn will be done and dusted. We arrive at this left-hander. It is a very hard left-hander if you don't get it right. The only way to get it right is that you will need to stay at the most right part of the track, and you're going to downshift into gear 5, kiss that apex, and as soon as you kiss that apex, you will need to short shift into gear 6 and get that full throttle as early as possible without going off the track, and of course you would invalidate the lap. So it's a little bit of a risk versus return, but if you get it right, you can win a couple of tenths easily here. So we're going to downshift into gear 5, short shift into gear 6, throttle as early as possible, and that turn would be done and dusted as well. Now we are arriving at this sequence of corners. I believe it's 13, 14, 15, if not mistaken. And it's a very, very hard corner. As you may see, we have already exceeded turn 13. If not mistaken, but somewhere beyond this point, that's where you need to start braking, having that flow, that momentum going into subsequent corner. And what we're going to do is that we're going to downshift into gear 4. We're going to keep gear 4 because if you downshift into gear 3, the car will get very snappy and we don't want that. But we want to keep it into gear 4, and as soon as we kiss the apex of turn 14, we're going to touch the leftward part of the track and short shift into gear 5, and that would be the point that we can put the full throttle without making the car spin. And we all know that the car is really, really snappy at that uphill. So it's a maker or breaker when it comes to the lap as well. You can do a stupendous lap, but if you don't get this turn right, it's easy to make the car spin or invalidate the lap. So what we're going to do is that we're going to downshift into gear 4, kiss the apex. As soon as we kiss the apex, we short shift into gear 5, and we're going to get that throttle as early as possible. As far as I'm concerned, when you are on gear 5 and you are steering very well, the car would not snap if you get on the full throttle, because you will have the short shifting element into contention, and that would be it. So short shifting into gear 4, kissing the apex, short shifting into gear 5, getting the full throttle, and that would be the sequence of corners done and dusted. Now the last chicane. Beyond the 50-meter mark, what we're going to do, we're going to attack the last chicane, and we're going to downshift into gear 3. We're going to literally ride over the first part of the chicane, and that would put the car into the second part of the chicane by kissing the apex of it. And we are still on gear 3, but what we're going to do is that beyond that, we're going to short shift into gear 4, and we are going to try to mangle as much as possible with the steering. So this is a little bit of a technique that we try not to make the car spin, but also get that traction required in order to continue the lap. So we're going to downshift into gear 3, mount that part of the chicane, and get the throttle as early as possible by short shifting to gear 4. And that would be the corner, the last chicane corner. So now we're going to arrive at this part. So at the 60-meter mark, we're going to downshift into gear 3. and this is all about getting the flow right. This is the last time that the car is gonna brake, is gonna apply the brakes. So at turns 18 and 19, this is the last part where the car is going to apply the brakes. When you apply the brakes here, we're going to downshift into gear 3, mounting the apex. And beyond that point, what we're going to do is that we're going to half throttle, or if not full throttle at the first part beyond turn 18. Then we would lift the throttle, we would short shift into gear 5, and beyond that, when we complete turn 19, that's the point where the car would have to full throttle until the end of the lap, taking the shortest distance possible and turning on the DRS at the last part of the track. So we're going to downshift into gear 3, get the flow going, short shift into gear 4, short shift into gear 5, get the flow going, taking the shortest distance possible, turning on the DRS, and that would be the explained hot lap of the Imola Grand Prix. So that's basically it when it comes to the track guide of the Imola Grand Prix for the database racers. I hope you have enjoyed this content, and hit me up if you have any questions. Thank you again guys, and I'll see you on track. Take care.